Hey, it's AP Psych students. So if you're watching this, you probably missed our first lesson for Standard 2. This is on Friday, August 14th. I didn't put one on this morning because it just had some fails. So hang on just a second. So what we did first is we took a quiz. The quiz is under quizzes in Canvas. You click on quizzes and then go down. It's I think it's like the third one down. There's one group and then it says practice quizzes. I think it's the second one. It says Unit 1, Standard 1, Formative Assessment. And that's the quiz you're going to take. When you open it up, it'll ask for a code, and the word is BRAVE, B-R-A-V-E, and it's all lowercase. And so you put that in and you take your quiz. The quiz is set up, it's a formative assessment. For me, formative assessment just means you're forming the knowledge, and I want to do a temperature check and see where you are. It tells me when I look at your results as a class, like, ooh, what's wrong? They didn't know question 9. And so maybe I need to reteach it. Maybe I just wrote a bad question and I need to fix the quiz. So it gives me information that way. The formative assessments like that are not designed for punishment. Maybe you don't know Standard 1. Maybe you were out, you've been sick, you've been absent. Maybe you just don't get Standard 1. So it really tells you more than it tells me. It tells you where you are in Standard 1. If it's easy and you ace it, then you're good to go on Standard 1. If you take the quiz and you fail it, then you should be going, oh, wait, now what do I need to do? Don't just go, oh, I failed a quiz, bummer. No, you failed the quiz. So now you need to, maybe you didn't do the reading I asked you to do, or maybe you didn't do the videos, watch the videos that I asked you to do. Maybe you were absent and you didn't hear me give the lecture about it yesterday on the 13th. So maybe you need to go back and do that. And so that's just alerting you that you're not ready on that standard and you need to take some kind of action to get ready. Maybe you did everything and you still don't get it. Then you want to schedule a conference with me and you and I can say we can just do a video chat and talk about it till we get you to that mastery. So that's really what formative assessment is. So you're going to go take that quiz and then you will see where you are. You can take it again and you can also use your notes. You don't have to. I might take it once without my notes and see how I did if I could do it because your test is not going to be able to, you're not going to be able to use your notes. See how I did and then go back and take it with my notes if I didn't do well. Or I can take it one time and then maybe right before the test, I'll go back and test myself again. So a couple ways you can use it. Just know that you have a couple of attempts to take it. And if you have a 504 or an IEP, then I added the extra time in for you. I can do that individually. And I probably gave you an extra attempt above everybody else too. So anyway, just be aware of that. So you'll take that quiz. I'm going to go ahead. I'm not going to pause and let you do that. I'm going to go ahead and tell you just the information. We didn't get very far today. We looked at this first slide, and also there was a poll that you could take. It was a link on your agenda for today. So if you took the poll, it was about the idea of nature versus nurture. And that is a big issue in psychology. We're always looking at behavior. Why do you behave the way you do? Why do you think the way you do? Is it because you were born that way, or is it because that's the way you were raised? So nature is your genetics and how you were born. It's just innate in you, innate. And nurture is what you've learned in your environment, how you were raised, those kind of things. And so a lot of our behavior may be because genetically we're predisposed for that, but it also may be that's the way we've learned to behave. And so there's a big debate. What causes us to do certain things? Is it nature versus nurture? Now, the best way to figure out whether some of our things like our likes and dislikes, if you did the poll, or our talents, are those natured? Were we born that way with certain likes and dislikes, or is that nurture? Do we learn that from our parents? The best way to figure out, is it nature, is it nurture, is to look at twin studies. And they look at studies of twins, identical twins who've been raised in separate places and separate environments. And so it doesn't happen a lot anymore, but in the past, it wasn't uncommon for when identical twins were put up for adoption, one baby would be given to one couple and another baby to another couple. The idea being, well, two families get a baby. So I don't think they do that anymore. So they would separate the twins. Well, researchers then could locate pairs of separated twins, and you see stories about this in the news where this happened. And then you can see if it's an identical twin, they shared the same egg, the egg split, they're genetically the same. And so if they both do same things, they have these same habits or features or traits or personality traits or anything like that, that means, it is nature that they were genetically made that way. But if, they have differences, then we can kind of ascribe those to nurture sometimes because, maybe your sense of humor, that probably comes, the research shows it probably comes from your environment. If your family's funny and you're raised to make jokes and things, you probably have a better sense of humor than if you were raised in a stoic family that they don't joke. And so your humor, oftentimes, researchers would say that has more of a nurture quality to it. But like your ability to carry a tune, some of your musical talents, some of that is inherent. They've done research to show that it tends to be, your ability to carry a tune tends to be nature. You're born with it, and nurture, not nurture, you're not raised that way. For example, like in my family, our family, we're terrible singers. We can't carry a tune. My dad can, but the rest, and his side of the family, but my mom's side of the family, we all take after that, and none of us can carry a tune. If you heard us sing Happy Birthday and you're a singer, you'd be appalled. It doesn't mean I don't like to sing. It doesn't mean I wasn't raised with singing around me. It just means I wasn't raised with good singing around me. And so, so part of that, I can probably learn to sing and sing better than I do, but it's a little harder to overcome than somebody who actually, was born with ability. So, so they look at those type of issues to see what was nature and what was nurture. And that's going to be part of as we look at perspectives, or we call them approaches or perspectives or schools of thought in psychology, those schools of thought are going to have an opinion. Is this nature? Is this nurture? So this will be a theme that runs throughout psychology. So I just wanted to hit it here. Now, when we talk about schools of psychology, we've looked at structuralism and functionalism. They were the first two approaches or perspectives or schools of psychology, whatever we call it, that's all the same thing. They're the first two ways of looking at behavior using psychology. We don't use those anymore. So we're going to set those aside. Those are historical. They're not used. But we're going to look at 7 different approaches that are used today. All right. And it's not that one is better than the other. They're just different in the way they approach why we behave the way we do. So what I want you to do is be sure and go back to the agenda, click on the link that says helpful chart. I'm going to pop it up here so you see it. This is the contemporary approaches chart. This is something that I think is very important. If you were in class, I would print this and give it to you. And so if you have a printer, print it and put it in your notebook. It's that important. Some things aren't worth your ink. Like yesterday, I'm like, you could just draw it in there. This is worth your ink. If you don't have a printer, then you're going to make a copy digitally. Just make a copy of it and put it into your AP Psychology file, into the Unit 1A sub file. Put it in there because you're going to use it. You can see that you can edit your copy. One way to use this is just to go in and highlight keywords so that as we use these approaches, we'll do like story problems with the approaches. And as we use them, you can kind of highlight the keywords and it'll help you remember when you do a little story problem and I ask you what approach is it, you can kind of tell from the keywords, or you could pop some keywords that you see in the problems in there. Otherwise, you can write it on the paper. Again, I probably write it, okay? So this is just the shortcut. It tells you about the approach, it tells you the people. And within it, it'll tell you some of the keywords. So I think this is really helpful. This standard, unlike standard 1, where we're just going to kind of sit it aside, and after the test, we'll be like, okay, we'll see you again in May when we get ready for the test. This standard 2, we're going to use throughout the course. And so it'll make more and more sense. When you come back to standard 2 in your review, you'll be like, oh yeah, I know all this. It's super easy. At first, it's a little blurry because it's an overview. And so you're like, what exactly is she talking about? It'll make more and more sense as we go along. And it's something we're going to use for the entire course. Okay, so today's lesson, by the way, was pretty short. We waited on everybody to take their quiz. They took the poll. So I'm just going to get you started in the schools of psychology. So we're going to call them approaches. I'm going to try and call them consistently approaches. So we're going to just take a look at this PowerPoint, and I'm going to talk to you about the first approach to psychology. The first one we're going to do is the behavioral approach. So as this is coming up, let me tell you about these approaches. So the approaches, like I said, schools, perspectives, it's all interchangeable. They're each looking at what causes our behavior. And so you want to look at what do they think is the most important factors. And that's, again, that goes to your keywords. So like to understand this, I'm going to try and give you an example. So if I suffer from depression, and you may suffer from depression, you probably know someone who suffers from depression, so you're probably familiar with characteristics, behavior of depression, maybe withdrawing, maybe sleeping a lot, maybe just, being sad. There's different characteristics, and we'll learn that when we study depression at the end. But if you know somebody who's depressed or you deal with depression yourself, then, we depressed people exhibit certain behaviors. All right, so these approaches are going to try and explain the behaviors of depression. So for example, the biological approach is like a medical approach. So biological approach is going to say there's something wrong in your biology that's causing you to be depressed and exhibit depressed behaviors. So maybe you've got a tumor. Okay, so, we can get in there, take out the tumor, and we'll take, a medical approach. So we call it biomedical sometimes, take out the tumor. Or most usually, the biomedical approaches, your brain chemistry is off. You're not releasing enough of the neurotransmitter serotonin. So we're going to give you medication that will help equal out your brain chemistry, put more serotonin in your system, and that's going to make you feel less depressed and behave less depressed. So a biological approach is a medical approach. We're going to fix it medically. That's their approach, all right? Another approach might be the cognitive approach. And as we'll learn, cognitive approach, it's all about your thinking, okay? So cognitive is, about your memory, about your thinking, and those kinds of things. A cognitive psychologist, or in cognitive psychology, their approach to depression is that your depression is caused by your negative thinking or your bad thoughts. And so if we change your thinking, change your thought processes, we can change that behavior and eliminate that depression and that depressed behavior. Okay, so we're going to just change your thinking. That would be a talk therapy kind of thing and helping you understand it. Now, a behavioral approach to depression, behaviorists believe that everything that you do, all your behavior, is because you've learned it. So they are straight up nurture. They don't think it's genetic or anything like that. It is straight up nurture. And so they believe that you learn it. And the way you learn it is some way your behavior, that depressed behavior, has been reinforced, or you have learned by observing, like social learning. So maybe your mother has depression, and so you have watched her, and then you learn to behave like that with those depressed symptoms. This is not the best one for depression, but this is how they would approach it. You're not going to use this for treatment of depression, though, okay? And so, or they would say a big common one with behavior is that you have been reinforced, either rewarded or punished. And so that's why you exhibit the behavior. And so that maybe if you acted sad and you got lots of extra attention, and so you learned that if you exhibit depressed behaviors, you'll get more attention. Okay, again, if you suffer from depression, I am not saying that this is the way, but this is the approach that behaviorists would use. They would change your behaviors. So that's what they would work on, all right? Another approach, humanistic. The humanistic approach says, well, you're depressed because you haven't reached your self-actualization. You haven't reached your full potential. And so they would coach you and help you reach your full potential so you wouldn't be depressed, okay? So nobody's right or wrong. It's just a different approach on how to solve the problem, the problematic behavior. So that's really what we're looking at. A psychoanalyst, if we use the psychoanalytical approach, would say, well, you're depressed because something has happened in your past and you've pushed it down to your unconscious and it's bothering you, it's causing this behavior. And if we use psychoanalysis and we bring that up from your unconscious, then that will solve the behavior. Okay, so again, there's no right or wrong, it's just a different kind